Oakley Miller is 62 years old, a retired carpenter who spent decades building homes with his hands. He's always been active, always on the move, and never thought much about his health until a few months ago. One evening, after finishing his dinner, he noticed a sudden, sharp pain in his knees. It wasn't the usual discomfort from a long day. This was something deeper, more intense. The next morning, the pain was still there, and it had spread to his lower back. Oakley thought he had just overdone it, but when the pain didn't ease after a few days, he knew something wasn't right. He made an appointment with his doctor. The doctor's words hit him like a ton of bricks. "Oakley, it looks like you're dealing with early-stage arthritis, and if you don't make some changes, this could get worse. Your joints are wearing down and your weight's contributing to the problem." Oakley sat there stunned. He'd always been so active, so strong. The thought of being limited by his own body, not being able to enjoy the simple pleasures like walking around the neighborhood or playing with his grandkids, was a bitter pill to swallow. It wasn't just the physical pain that worried him, it was the thought of losing his independence. But Oakley wasn't one to give up easily. He'd spent his life working with tools, solving problems, and making things better. If his body was telling him something, he was determined to listen. He asked his doctor for advice. And that's when he was introduced to apple cider vinegar, something he had only ever used in salad dressings. Oakley was told it could help with inflammation, digestion, and even weight management. At first, he was skeptical. How could something as simple as vinegar make a difference, he thought. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and Oakley was ready to try anything that might give him back his strength. So, Oakley began adding just 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar to his daily routine. He mixed it with water and sipped it in the mornings before breakfast. He didn't notice much at first, but after a few weeks, something changed. His knees weren't as stiff in the mornings, and the discomfort in his back seemed to ease. He also noticed he felt fuller longer, which helped him cut down on overeating and make better food choices. It wasn't a miracle, but it was a start, an encouraging one. Oakley found himself walking a little further each day, enjoying the time outdoors with his wife, and, most importantly, feeling like he was gaining control over his health again. That simple daily ritual became more than just a remedy. It was the beginning of a transformation. Oakley started paying more attention to what he ate, drinking more water, and adding more movement to his days. It wasn't just about losing weight or easing the pain. It was about reclaiming his vitality. He was starting to feel like Oakley again, the man who built homes with his hands, the man who never backed down from a challenge. And this time, the challenge was his own health. With the support of small changes like apple cider vinegar, Oakley was determined to see this journey through to the end, proving that age is just a number and health is something you can fight for, no matter how old you are. Oakley Miller had always been a man of action. In his 62 years, he had built homes from the ground up, raised 3 children, and spent countless hours outdoors. He never thought much about his health, never imagined a time when he'd feel held back by his own body. But that day, when the sharp pain in his knees didn't go away, he realized something was changing. Oakley, stubborn as he was, tried to push through it. He took a couple of over-the-counter painkillers, hoping it was just a fluke, something that would pass. But as the days went on, the pain persisted, creeping up his back and down his legs. It was as if his body was quietly but firmly telling him that it had had enough. The final blow came when he tried to walk up the stairs at his house and had to stop halfway, winded and in pain. It wasn't just physical anymore, it was emotional too. The thought of losing his independence, not being able to keep up with his grandkids, or take that hike through the woods that he loved so much, it hit him hard. That night, as he sat down for dinner, Oakley knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. He had to face the reality that his body was changing, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. His wife, Linda, had noticed too. She gently suggested that he go to the doctor and get it checked out. Oakley resisted at first, thinking it would pass, but the pain was too much now. "Okay, I'll go," he said finally. Little did he know that doctor's appointment would set him on a path that would change the rest of his life. At the doctor's office, Oakley learned that his body was beginning to show signs of early-stage arthritis. The doctor explained that the wear and tear from years of hard work had taken its toll on his joints. "Oakley," the doctor said gently, "you need to start making some changes. You can't keep pushing through this pain. If you don't take care of it now, it'll only get worse." That was the moment Oakley realized that his body wasn't invincible anymore. The weight of his lifestyle was catching up with him, and he needed to act. That evening, as Oakley sat in the living room, looking out the window at the setting sun, it hit him. He had always believed that getting older meant slowing down, but this was different. It wasn't just about aging, it was about taking responsibility for his health, something he had neglected for too long. Oakley knew he had to make changes, not just for his physical pain, but for his quality of life moving forward. But where to start? The answer came sooner than he expected. The next morning, Oakley woke up to a new reality. The pain in his knees and back was still there, but something was different. He didn't feel as defeated as he had the day before. After that doctor's visit, he had made a quiet promise to himself. He wasn't going to let this be the end of the road. Oakley knew that making changes at his age wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. The first step he took wasn't dramatic. It was something simple, something he could incorporate into his routine without much effort. Oakley started with one small change. He added a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar to his morning routine. His wife, Linda, had been reading about the benefits of apple cider vinegar and suggested it as a potential remedy for his inflammation. "I've heard it can help with pain and swelling, Oakley," she said, pouring him a glass with a bit of water. Oakley eyed the bottle skeptically but took a sip. He didn't expect much, but after a few days of trying it, he started noticing a slight difference. It wasn't instant relief, but his knees felt a little less stiff in the mornings. The deep, gnawing ache in his back seemed to ease up, even if just a little. It wasn't enough to make him feel like himself again, but it was a start. Every morning, Oakley would take his glass of water with apple cider vinegar before breakfast. At first, it felt like a chore, something new to fit into his already busy mornings. But after a couple of weeks, he started looking forward to it. His body was slowly responding, and Oakley felt like he was taking charge of his health for the first time in a while. It wasn't just the vinegar, though. It was the small lifestyle changes that followed. He started cutting back on sugar, drinking more water, and even going for short walks around the neighborhood. One morning, Linda joined him on a walk, a rarity in the past few years. They strolled side by side, the sun rising in the distance, and Oakley couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. His legs weren't perfect, but they were carrying him again. The pain was there, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it had been. And for the first time in months, Oakley felt like he was getting his life back step by step. That night, over dinner, Oakley shared his progress with Linda. "I'm not saying I'm running marathons yet," he chuckled, "but I'm starting to feel like I can do the things I love again. It's not a miracle, but it's a start." Linda smiled, her eyes filled with warmth and pride. "I'm proud of you, Oakley. Keep it up, and we'll keep walking together." In that moment, Oakley realized something. He wasn't alone in this. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with each small change, he was not only improving his health, but he was also rediscovering his strength, his purpose, and his resilience. Apple cider vinegar had become more than just a daily ritual. It was a symbol of his commitment to change. As the weeks went by, Oakley began to see more significant changes, but they didn't come as easily as he had hoped. The initial relief from the apple cider vinegar and the lifestyle adjustments was promising, but Oakley knew the real challenge was about to begin. While the pain in his knees had lessened, it wasn't gone, and his back, which had been the hardest to tackle, still gave him trouble after longer walks or standing for too long. It was a reminder that his body wasn't what it used to be. One afternoon, after working in the garden, Oakley sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He had always been the type to push through pain, to keep going no matter what. But now, he was learning that his body wasn't going to cooperate if he kept pushing it the same way. Oakley had to come to terms with the fact that he couldn't continue treating his body the way he had in the past. Something had to change, and that change was going to be more than just diet or exercise. It was going to be about pacing himself, listening to his body, and learning to accept that rest was as important as movement. That afternoon, Oakley sat down with Linda and confessed something he had been avoiding. "I've been trying to keep up with the way I used to live," he admitted, "but I think I'm learning that it's not about doing everything. It's about doing what I can and doing it well." Linda listened quietly, her hand resting gently on his. "Oakley, you've always been so strong, and you've pushed through things that would have stopped most people," she said softly. "But sometimes it's okay to slow down. It's okay to rest." Her words resonated with Oakley, and for the first time, he realized that pushing through the pain wasn't the solution anymore. The next day, Oakley visited his doctor for a follow-up appointment. The doctor asked him how things were going, and Oakley, with a sigh, confessed that he wasn't as far along as he had hoped. "It's getting better, but not fast enough," he said. The doctor nodded and reassured him. "Oakley, healing doesn't happen overnight. Your body needs time, and more importantly, you need to be kind to it." That advice stuck with him. Oakley decided it was time to slow down, no more trying to do everything at once. He began scheduling breaks during his daily walks, resting when he felt his body need it. He swapped out some of his more intense hobbies for gentler ones, like fishing by the lake or sitting outside with a good book. He also began incorporating more stretching and yoga into his routine, something he had never imagined doing in his younger years. The stretches helped to ease the tension in his muscles and joints, and Oakley felt a new sense of relief in ways he hadn't anticipated. One day, Oakley sat on the porch again, this time with a book in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon. He didn't feel the same overwhelming pain he had felt a month ago. Instead, he felt calm, content. It wasn't about being fixed or healed in the way he once imagined. It was about learning to live with his new reality, taking small steps each day and respecting the pace his body needed. Oakley realized then that his transformation wasn't just about pain relief. It was about adopting a new mindset, one that was centered on patience, balance, and acceptance. Weeks had passed since Oakley began pacing himself and embracing a slower, more mindful approach to his health. The changes, though subtle, were becoming more noticeable. He wasn't chasing after instant results anymore, he was simply living with more intention. But there was something else happening that Oakley didn't quite expect. His transformation was starting to affect those around him. It began with Linda. She noticed how much more present Oakley was, not just in the physical sense, but emotionally as well. He had always been there for her, but now he was more engaged, more relaxed. One evening, she suggested they take a walk down by the lake. Oakley hesitated at first. He'd been sticking to short walks around the neighborhood, afraid that pushing too far would bring back the pain. But Linda's warm encouragement gave him the confidence to give it a try. And to his surprise, he made it all the way down the path to the water's edge without any issues. As they sat together on the bench overlooking the lake, Oakley felt a quiet pride in his progress. It wasn't just about physical healing, it was about rediscovering his connection with Linda, the simple pleasures that had always been part of his life but had slipped away in the hustle of work and daily chores. Linda squeezed his hand, her eyes soft with affection. "I'm so proud of you, Oakley," she said, her voice full of warmth. The ripple effect didn't stop there. Oakley's children and grandchildren had begun to notice his changes too. They saw him smiling more, engaging in conversations with them without feeling winded or distracted by pain. One Saturday, Oakley was invited to his granddaughter's soccer game. In the past, he'd always found an excuse not to attend. His knees hurt, his back ached, or he just didn't feel like he could sit on the bleachers for an hour. But this time, he showed up, wearing a bright smile and sitting comfortably on the sidelines. Watching his granddaughter play, Oakley felt a deep sense of joy and gratitude. His health wasn't perfect, but he was there, fully present. As the weeks turned into months, Oakley continued his routine with apple cider vinegar, his daily walks, and his new approach to life. But it wasn't just about the physical changes anymore. It was the mental and emotional transformation that had taken place too. Oakley had learned to embrace rest, to slow down, and to listen to his body. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Every small step he took led to another. More time with his family, more peace of mind, and more energy to enjoy the life he had worked so hard to build. One evening, after a long day of working in the garden, Oakley found himself sitting on the porch again, watching the sunset. This time, there was no pain, there was no exhaustion, no sense of dread about what the next day would bring. Just a quiet contentment. Linda came outside, joining him on the porch swing, and they sat together in silence for a while. It wasn't the same as the old days when Oakley had the energy to work late into the night or go on long hikes, but it was enough. It was more than enough. For the first time in years, Oakley felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Oakley's life had transformed in ways he never anticipated, but there were still moments when he felt the weight of the changes. The mornings weren't always easy. There were days when his knees ached a little more or his back tightened unexpectedly. But these days, Oakley knew how to handle them. He wasn't trying to go back to the way things were before. He was embracing the new normal. And with each passing day, that new normal felt more comfortable. One morning, as he sat on the porch drinking his first cup of coffee, Oakley reflected on the journey. It wasn't the grand overhaul he had once imagined. There had been no dramatic transformation. Instead, it was the small, consistent steps that had made all the difference. The apple cider vinegar, the daily walks, the stretching. They were simple changes, but they added up. And while he hadn't completely rid himself of the pain, the discomfort had become something more manageable, something Oakley could live with. It no longer controlled him. What struck Oakley most was how his mindset had shifted. He no longer saw his health as something he was fighting against. Instead, he saw it as something to nurture. He wasn't angry at his body for slowing down. He was learning to work with it. There were moments of frustration, sure, but there was also a deep sense of peace. Oakley no longer felt trapped by the fear of what might happen if his health continued to decline. Instead, he felt empowered by the control he had taken back. This shift in perspective wasn't just something Oakley kept to himself. He shared it with his family, his children, and his friends. "It's not about fighting aging or pretending to be young again," he told his son one evening over dinner. "It's about accepting where I am, listening to my body, and making the most of what I've got. I may not be running marathons, but I'm doing things I enjoy again." His son nodded, impressed by his father's new outlook. Oakley could see the pride in his eyes. Oakley had always taught his children to be strong, to push through obstacles, but now he was teaching them the value of patience, of self-care, and of accepting their own limitations with grace. As Oakley continued his routine, he found that his energy levels were more stable throughout the day. The mid-afternoon crashes that used to leave him sluggish and irritable had mostly disappeared. He still had his bad days, everyone did, but now they were fewer and far between. He found himself looking forward to each new day, not because it was going to be perfect, but because it was his to live on his own terms. And with each passing day, Oakley became more confident in his ability to adapt to whatever challenges lay ahead. One weekend, Oakley decided to take a road trip with Linda, something they had done often when they were younger. The journey wasn't as long or as ambitious as their old trips, but it was enough. They took it slow, stopping at little towns along the way, enjoying the scenery and reminiscing about the past. There was a time when Oakley would have tried to push through, to drive all day without rest, eager to reach their destination. But now, he was content with the journey itself. It wasn't just about getting somewhere, it was about being present, enjoying the moments, and making new memories. As they sat in a quiet park overlooking a lake, Oakley realized that this was the life he had been searching for all along. It wasn't about fighting time or wishing things were different. It was about embracing what was. Oakley had learned to find joy in the little things, to savor each moment, and to take care of himself along the way. And in that moment, with Linda by his side and the peaceful lake in front of him, Oakley knew he had found something more valuable than a cure for his aches and pains. He had found balance, and with it, a deeper sense of peace. As Oakley sat on the porch, the sun slowly sinking into the horizon, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Life had unfolded in unexpected ways over the past few months. He had come face to face with his limitations, but instead of giving up or feeling defeated, he had found a way to thrive. There were still days when the pain in his knees would flare up or his back would remind him of his age. But those moments no longer felt like the end of the road. They were simply part of the journey. Oakley had learned a vital lesson that so many others often miss: the importance of slowing down. In his younger years, he had always been in a rush. He had pushed himself to his limits, always striving to accomplish more, to do more. But now, Oakley understood that life wasn't a race. It was a series of moments, small and precious, and it was up to him to savor them. The walks, the quiet mornings with Linda, the time spent with his children and grandchildren, these were the things that mattered most. One afternoon, Oakley was sitting in the living room when his daughter Sarah came over with her 2 kids. "Grandpa, look, we made you something," said little Emma, holding up a drawing she had made of their family. Oakley smiled as he looked at the crayon masterpiece. It was a simple drawing, stick figures, a sun in the corner, and a big tree. But to Oakley, it was a symbol of everything he had been fighting for: to be present, to be a part of his family's lives, to make memories that would last long after the aches and pains faded. As Oakley watched his grandchildren play in the yard, he realized how much had changed since that doctor's visit months ago. Back then, he couldn't imagine ever being able to run around with them, to keep up with their energy. But now, with each day, he was able to do more, not just physically, but emotionally. He was more present, more engaged, and far more grateful than he had ever been before. His family had noticed the shift too. They saw the Oakley who was learning to enjoy the small moments, who wasn't constantly focused on the next task or the next job. Oakley had always been a doer, a man who took pride in his work and his accomplishments. But now he was finding pride in simply being, in being there for his family, in being able to enjoy a sunset, in being able to sit and listen without feeling the weight of his own body holding him back. One evening, as he and Linda sat on the porch after dinner, Oakley looked out over the yard, watching the fireflies dance in the air. Linda leaned her head on his shoulder, and for a moment, they just sat in silence, taking it all in. "I'm proud of you, Oakley," she said softly. "You've come so far." Oakley smiled, feeling a deep warmth in his chest. It wasn't about the pain or the setbacks anymore. It was about the journey. He had fought for his health, yes, but more importantly, he had fought for his life, for the moments that mattered. In those quiet evenings, Oakley knew that his transformation was complete, not just in his body, but in his heart. He was no longer the man he had been, pushing through each day with exhaustion and frustration. He had become someone who understood the value of taking it slow, of embracing the present, and of finding joy in every little thing. And as he looked at Linda, her hand in his, Oakley realized that this was just the beginning of the rest of his life. One where he would continue to grow, continue to change, but most of all, continue to live fully. Oakley's life had gradually shifted from one of relentless activity to one of mindful presence. And while he had embraced the changes, he couldn't deny that there were still moments when impatience crept in. It wasn't the physical pain that bothered him as much as it had in the past, it was the lingering sense of urgency. Oakley, who had spent so many years pushing forward, now found himself learning to slow down. Some days that was easier than others. One afternoon, while Oakley was sitting in his favorite chair by the window, he thought about how far he had come. He had been so determined to conquer his health struggles as if they were just another obstacle to overcome. But now he understood that overcoming wasn't always about pushing harder. Sometimes it was about stepping back. It wasn't easy to accept, especially for someone like Oakley, who had always prided himself on his strength and resilience. But learning to let go, to accept things as they were, was part of the healing process. Linda noticed it too. Over the past few months, she had watched Oakley transform in ways she hadn't expected. He was more relaxed, more content with the ebb and flow of life. Oakley had always been the one to take charge, to plan every detail of their vacations, their home repairs, even their dinner parties. But now, she saw a new Oakley, one who was content to let the day unfold, who found joy in the moments that used to pass by unnoticed. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Linda turned to Oakley and said, "I've seen the change in you, Oakley, not just in your body, but in your mind too. You're learning to let go, and that's more important than anything." Her words struck Oakley deeply. It was true. He was letting go, not of the things he loved, but of the need to control every aspect of his life. He was learning that it was okay to rest, to take breaks, and to appreciate what he had instead of constantly striving for more. The next day, Oakley decided to take a different approach to his walk. Instead of pushing himself to walk as far as he could, he decided to simply stroll, taking in the sights, the sounds, the feel of the wind on his face. He didn't have a goal. He wasn't trying to reach a certain distance or burn a specific number of calories. He was just walking, and for the first time in a long time, Oakley felt a sense of freedom. It wasn't about the destination, it was about the journey itself. Later that afternoon, as Oakley sat with his grandson in the yard, they played a simple game of catch. He couldn't run as fast as he used to, but he could still catch the ball, still throw it with a steady hand. His grandson laughed, his eyes wide with excitement as Oakley made a perfect throw. "Grandpa, you're the best," the boy exclaimed. Oakley smiled, his heart swelling with love. It wasn't about being the best or the fastest. It was about being there, sharing that moment and creating memories. Oakley realized that he had been searching for the wrong thing. It wasn't about trying to turn back time or fix everything at once. It was about learning to accept what he had, to find contentment in the present, and to recognize the strength in patience. Every day, with each small step, Oakley was finding a new way to live, not perfectly, but fully. And in that realization, he found peace. As the months went on, Oakley continued to grow into this new version of himself. He wasn't the man he had once been, but that didn't mean he was any less strong. He had found a different kind of strength, one rooted in acceptance, in patience, and in the quiet courage to face each day with an open heart. And with Linda by his side and the love of his family surrounding him, Oakley knew he had found something more lasting than physical health. He had found a way to live well. As the seasons changed, Oakley felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life he was living. His journey had been long, filled with challenges, but it had led him to a place of balance. He was no longer defined by his pain or the limitations of his aging body. Instead, he had found a new sense of vitality, not just in his body, but in his spirit. Oakley knew that the habits he had built over the past months weren't just temporary fixes, they were part of a new way of life, one that he could carry with him for years to come. One morning, Oakley stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at his reflection. He had changed. There was no denying it. His body had softened in some places, strengthened in others. But it wasn't the changes on the outside that mattered most. It was the transformation he felt within. Oakley had learned to embrace his age, to appreciate the wisdom that came with it, and to make peace with the fact that his body wasn't invincible. That didn't mean he was giving up. It meant he was adjusting, listening, and respecting his body's needs. As he stood there, he remembered the days when he would push through pain, ignoring the warning signs, always believing that strength meant never stopping. But now, strength meant knowing when to rest, when to pause, and when to allow himself the grace of imperfection. Oakley smiled at his reflection, not in a boastful way, but with a quiet understanding. He was proud of how far he had come. Later that day, Oakley was sitting in the living room, sipping his afternoon tea, when his son stopped by with his family. The grandchildren immediately ran over, climbing into Oakley's lap and asking him to tell them a story. It was these moments, these small, fleeting moments, that Oakley cherished the most. He wasn't the energetic grandpa he once was, but he was still there. He was still present. And that, to him, was enough. "Grandpa," his grandson asked, looking up at him with bright eyes, "how did you get so strong? You don't even walk with a cane anymore." Oakley chuckled softly, his heart swelling with love for the boy. "Well, it didn't happen overnight," Oakley said, his voice gentle. "I've learned a lot about taking care of myself, about slowing down, and about listening to my body. Sometimes it's not about being fast or strong in the way we think. It's about finding the strength to keep going no matter what." His grandson nodded thoughtfully, as if Oakley had just shared the secret of life itself. For a moment, Oakley felt a deep connection with the little boy. He wasn't just telling a story. He was passing down a legacy, one of patience, resilience, and balance. Oakley realized that his journey was no longer just his own. It was becoming part of something bigger, something he could share with his family, something they could carry with them into their own lives. The changes Oakley had made in his own life were rippling out to those around him. He was teaching his children and grandchildren that health wasn't just about physical strength. It was about living with intention, with awareness, and with compassion for oneself. Oakley wasn't just recovering from pain. He was creating a new legacy of health, one rooted in mindfulness and self-care. That evening, as Oakley and Linda sat together after dinner, Oakley thought about the future. He didn't know what it would hold, no one did, but he felt ready for whatever came his way. He had found his balance, and in doing so, he had found a new sense of purpose. Linda reached over and squeezed his hand, her eyes reflecting the quiet contentment they both shared. Oakley leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment, just breathing in the peace that surrounded him. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for something to change. He was simply enjoying the life he had built. And that, Oakley realized, was the most important gift of all. As Oakley's life settled into a new rhythm, he began to realize something profound. The transformation he had experienced wasn't just physical. It was spiritual and emotional too. He had started this journey looking for relief from the pain in his knees and back, but somewhere along the way, he had discovered a deeper sense of peace. His priorities had shifted, and he was no longer measuring his worth by how much he could accomplish or how much he could endure. Oakley had found strength and simplicity in taking things one step at a time and in focusing on the present rather than the past or future. It was early one morning when Oakley's son, Greg, called him up. "Hey Dad, the family's getting together for a weekend trip to the mountains. We'd love for you to come." Oakley paused for a moment, considering the offer. In the past, he would have jumped at the opportunity to spend time with his family, but he had also become more attuned to his body's needs. Would the long drive be too much for him? Would the climb up the mountain trail aggravate his knees? There was a time when he would have said no, out of fear or self-doubt. But now, Oakley felt a renewed sense of confidence in himself and his ability to enjoy the trip, no matter what challenges might arise. "I think I'll join you," Oakley said, his voice steady. "I might not be able to hike like I used to, but I'd love to be there with everyone." The weekend trip turned out to be one of the best experiences Oakley had in a long time. The mountains were breathtaking, and the air was so fresh it felt like a balm to his soul. Though Oakley didn't hike the long trails with the younger members of the family, he still enjoyed sitting by the fire pit, sharing stories and laughing with his children and grandchildren. There was a sense of connection that Oakley had always valued, but now he appreciated it in a new way. He wasn't focused on what he couldn't do. He was fully immersed in the joy of being present with those he loved. By the end of the weekend, as Oakley sat on a rock by the lake, watching his grandkids splash around in the water, he felt a profound sense of contentment. Life had always been about achievements, about pushing through obstacles, but Oakley had learned that the most fulfilling moments weren't about what he could do or accomplish. They were about the connections he made, the people he loved, and the peace he felt inside. As Oakley watched his family enjoying themselves, he realized that his health journey had given him more than just physical relief. It had allowed him to be more present with his loved ones, to enjoy life's little moments with greater depth. Oakley had found a balance between taking care of his body and honoring his spirit. He had discovered that sometimes the greatest strength came from accepting the things he couldn't change and finding joy in the things he could. Later that evening, Oakley and Linda sat together in a quiet cabin, watching the fire crackle in the hearth. Linda, who had been by his side through every step of this journey, looked at him with admiration. "I've never seen you so at peace, Oakley," she said softly. Oakley smiled, a deep, content smile. "I've learned that peace comes from within," he replied, "and sometimes it's not about fixing everything, it's about accepting what is and finding the beauty in it." As they sat in the glow of the fire, Oakley realized something. He didn't need to be the man he once was, pushing himself to the limit. The man he had become, the one who valued rest, connection, and presence, was just as strong, if not stronger. He had built a legacy of health, not through endless effort or perfection, but through patience, understanding, and self-care. And in the warmth of Linda's hand in his, Oakley knew he had everything he needed to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Months passed, and Oakley's life continued in a peaceful rhythm. He had fully embraced the new normal, accepting that while his body wasn't as strong as it once was, it was still capable of bringing him joy. He had learned to move with care, not out of fear, but with the understanding that each movement mattered. The lessons Oakley had learned about health, balance, and patience had become a core part of his being. But the most important realization of all was that this journey wasn't just about him. It was about those who would follow in his footsteps, his family, his children, and his grandchildren. One afternoon, Oakley was sitting with his daughter, Sarah, in the garden. The sun was low in the sky, casting a golden hue over everything. Sarah, now in her 30s, was always asking him for advice. She was a busy mother, juggling work, family, and life's many demands. As they sat together, Oakley could see the stress in her eyes, a reflection of the life he once lived, constantly rushing, constantly pushing. "You know, Dad," Sarah said, her voice tinged with exhaustion, "I don't know how you do it. How do you stay so calm? I'm always running around, trying to keep up with everything, and I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water." Oakley smiled softly, his heart swelling with love for his daughter. "Sarah," he began, "I've learned something over the years. It's not about doing everything. It's about doing what matters most and doing it with intention. I used to think I had to push through every day, always trying to do more, be more. But now I know that the best things in life aren't the ones I've worked the hardest for. They're the moments I've stopped to appreciate." Sarah looked at him, a mix of curiosity and longing in her eyes. Oakley could see that she wanted something different, something more fulfilling than the hectic pace she was living. He gently took her hand and continued, "I spent so many years focused on work, on fixing everything. But the real work is in being present, listening to your body, honoring your needs, and most importantly, spending time with the people you love. I've learned that health isn't just about physical strength, it's about mental and emotional balance too." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, and Oakley could see the weight of his words sink in. For so long, she had been chasing after a version of success that he had once believed in too, the kind that required constant striving, always pushing forward. But now she was learning a different kind of success, one rooted in stillness, in slowing down to savor the things that truly mattered. "Dad," Sarah said, her voice shaking, "I don't know if I can change everything right away, but I want to try. I want to be more like you. I want to find peace in the little things." Oakley felt a lump in his throat as he looked at his daughter. He had spent his life teaching her how to be strong, but now she was teaching him something too. How to let go of the pressure to be perfect, how to embrace imperfection with grace. That night, as Oakley and Linda sat on the porch watching the stars, Oakley reflected on the conversation with Sarah. He had spent so many years thinking about what he could do for himself, about the changes he needed to make to improve his health. But now he realized that the real gift he had was not just the lessons he had learned for himself, it was the ability to pass those lessons on. Oakley had begun to understand that his legacy wasn't just about what he had accomplished. It was about what he could give to those who came after him. Linda, sensing his thoughts, turned to him and smiled. "You've done well, Oakley. You've shown our family that health isn't just about being strong. It's about being present, about making time for the things that matter." Oakley smiled back, grateful for her steady presence by his side. Together, they had built a life rooted in love, in patience, and in an unwavering commitment to each other. And now they were passing that on to their children and grandchildren. As Oakley sat there, feeling the weight of the evening air and the warmth of Linda's hand in his, he realized that the journey was far from over. It wasn't about reaching a final destination, it was about continuing to grow, to learn, and to be there for the ones he loved. And in that moment, Oakley knew that his legacy of health, balance, and mindfulness would live on in the generations that followed. He had found peace, not just for himself, but for his entire family. And that, to Oakley, was the greatest gift of all. Oakley Miller's journey has been one of remarkable transformation. From a man constantly pushing through pain, believing strength was about enduring, to someone who now understands that true strength lies in listening to his body, slowing down, and embracing the present. His health wasn't restored overnight, but through small, consistent changes like adding apple cider vinegar to his routine, taking mindful walks, and accepting his limitations, he found a new way to live, one rooted in balance and peace. But Oakley's transformation wasn't just physical. He learned to appreciate the simple moments with his family, no longer rushing through life, but savoring the joys of being present. And perhaps most profoundly, he passed on the lessons he had learned to his children and grandchildren, teaching them that health isn't just about what you do, it's about how you live. As we reflect on Oakley's story, take a moment to consider your own journey. Are you pushing through pain or challenges, believing that strength comes only through endurance? What if true strength lies in slowing down, listening to your body, and giving yourself the grace to rest? Small changes, like Oakley's, can lead to big shifts in how you experience your life. Remember, the journey to better health isn't about perfection. It's about being gentle with yourself, showing up for the moments that matter, and embracing each day with patience and love. And just like Oakley, you too can find a new path, one that leads not just to better health, but to a life that's richer, fuller, and more connected to what truly matters.